Are you feeling stuck in a life that looks perfect on paper, but deep down you're wondering if there's something more? Today I sit down with Gwen Dittmar, a former pharmaceutical biotech researcher who left her dream job to become a certified coach, healer, and guide. Gwen brings a wealth of knowledge from her own life experiences and professional journey, combining spirituality, holistic therapy, and practical coaching methods. She's here to show how a breathwork technique can help you release anxiety, trauma, and chronic health issues without leaving your desk. Stay until the end because Gwen shares a perspective on healing that could save you years of jumping between different wellness practices. She reveals how to integrate multiple healing modalities into one practical approach that honors both your human experience and your spiritual journey. Let's dive in. You're listening to the Born to Heal podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Katie Deming. After 2 decades of practicing as an oncologist and caring for thousands of patients, I've seen firsthand how our healthcare system places obstacles in your path to true healing. My guests and I will bridge the worlds of Western medicine and alternative healing to help you achieve optimal health. Expect to uncover new insights, share a few laughs, and maybe even shed some tears along the way. But most of all, we'll learn how to heal from within together. So let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back, everyone, to the Born to Heal podcast. I am excited today to be joined by Gwen Dittmar, who is a coach, healer, and guide for people who are dealing with illness. Gwen, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I love it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your work so that we can understand, and maybe, if your story of how you got there is important, doing that as well, but just giving us a picture of who is Gwen and what is the work that you're doing in the world.
Yes. So I really relate to your story because I grew up on the East Coast. I grew up with the great values of work hard, strong work ethic, go to school, get a great job, have a career, have a path, right? Do the very traditional. And I'm super grateful for that because it has given me really strong core values and grounding. And at the same time, I did that path. I worked in pharmaceutical, biotech, research, and I rose through the ladder and I had a great career. And however, all along, I kept asking myself, who am I? What am I doing here? Is this what I'm really meant to be doing here? And at each inception, when I would have a really pivotal moment of asking myself those deep questions, wondering, okay, I have the dream life here in Santa Monica in California. I have the car, I have the place to live, I have the career. Like, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? Because I always felt like there was something much deeper inside of me. I was really interested in health and healing and spirituality and consciousness, even as a little kid. And then as a teen, I had a near-death experience. And then that's kind of what set me on the path of wanting to be able to help people with their body because I was struggling with an illness that they didn't really know what it was for a long time. And then finally they figured out what it was. And a lot of the treatments, even as a kid, just didn't align for me. I didn't want to do certain things. And my parents were frustrated with me. My doctors were frustrated with me until I met an amazing doctor. And that kind of really supported my path. But I did still go that traditional route. And when I kept asking myself those questions, something would come into my world that would be this little breadcrumb, right? That would say, okay, now you're going to go get your master's in spiritual psychology while you're working in this very analytical scientific world. And then that opened up to different healing modalities, different health and consciousness modalities. And then eventually I got to a point where I did really feel like it was time for me to exit. It was time for me to leave. And that took a long time. So I did coaching, very traditional coaching, I would say at first. However, because of the master's in spiritual psychology, it was a very highly experiential master's. So everything that we were learning that you would traditionally learn in psychology, we had to practice and do within ourselves. So like inner child healing, projection work, deep trauma healing, lots of different stuff. And that just taught me how to be really who I am And so I started showing up in my traditional work in a very different way. And it was through that that I would sit with somebody and I started to own a lot of, I think, these qualities that I'd always had since I was a kid, whether you want to call it psychic or intuitive or just being able to be a channel and to see things. And I just started to, because I had done my own work, I started to be able to be more authentic in this very scientific, and very analytical and perfectionism and just really ask people like, as we're going through the pharmaceutical research, that something else is going on for you. What is going on? Right. And just having these deep conversations with people, something opened inside of me where I just felt like, oh my gosh, like this is what I'm really meant to be doing here. And coaching some of the staff that I had been working with on the side, not for financial gain of any sort. And then I eventually had a doctor that I had been working with, and he was like, I want to pay you. Every time you come back, we sit down for 2 hours in my office, and you've really changed the trajectory of my business, of my marriage, of my life, of my parenting. And I want to pay you. And I said, well, I really can't receive money. So why don't you just refer me to some of your friends who might be struggling and who might benefit from this? And that's kind of how my coaching started back in 2007 when I was still working in that industry. And I still worked for about 10 years and I did my coaching and my healing work on the side. And then in 2017, I really felt this call of like, it's time, it's really time. And I had just about that same time started doing a lot of breath work and doing training and assisting my teacher. And so that's kind of like the evolution of how I got to be where I am now. And that's why I love a lot of what I do in my work is, and I think why a lot of clients seek me out is that I'm very grounded in human life. Like I'm a mom, I'm a single mom, I've been through divorce. I've also been a single mom before I got married and got divorced. Like I'm sober 19 years. I had a very traditional career path and I understand that desire to want to leave, but also to want to be responsible. And so I really love being with people and bringing both the very practical, very grounded, very real approach to coaching and bettering your life, bettering your mindset, bettering your nervous system, while also I am very, very connected to the unknown, to the universe, to whatever people want to call that vibration or frequency or healing energy. So I love bringing both because I think both are so real, right? It's like we are here in these human bodies, in these human lives. It can be beautiful, it can be gritty, it can be incredible, it can be messy. And just being able to use everything that you're experiencing in your human life for answering those deeper questions that I think a lot of people have. And sometimes it's even scary to acknowledge that you have those deeper questions. But I love being a guide, and we were talking before we started that, I hesitate to say coach because like we do a lot more than that. We do a lot of healing energy. We do a lot of, depth, but also looking at your actual human life and how can you have that be exactly what you want it to be. And if it's not exactly what you want it to be, really use it. Use it for your benefit so that you can grow, you can expand, you can evolve. And I love empowering people to know that they have all of these tools inside of themselves so that eventually they get to a point where they're like, thank you so much, Gwen, like I'm great. And maybe they just come back for little tune-ups, right? Like we go to the doctor and check how we're doing every 3 to 6 months, once a year. And we do that with our teeth. We do it with our car. So like, why would we not do that with the most important thing, which is like our spirit and our emotions and our lives?
Hey, it's Dr. Katie. You may have noticed that I talk a lot about water on this podcast. After a year of research, I've learned that optimal water needs 3 key elements: filtration, mineralization, and structure, just like natural spring water. Doing all these steps to my own drinking water took me several hours a week. That's why I'm so impressed with Spring Aqua. Their system incorporates all 3 elements in one system that is basically modeling its technology after the renowned healing waters of the spring at Lourdes, France. I personally use their Wet 7 model, which offers alkalinized hydrogen water and saves me hours each week. Spring Aqua has dramatically improved hydration for both me and my family, and I believe it could do the same for you. I recently had the owner, Kenny Lou, on the show, and his integrity really shines through in this product. If you're interested in experiencing truly hydrating water that mimics nature's process, please visit the link in the episode description. Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And I love how you follow the breadcrumbs in your own journey to get to this place where you're now able to serve in this very authentic way. And what's really, I think, important is that oftentimes it like literally is just about, like you said, being human and teaching people how to navigate through this. And the conditioning that you've talked about, most of us were conditioned into this is the idea of what your life should look like. And this is one of the big things that I talk about with my clients is that what you're doing and who you've become may be a product of the environment, the family, the schooling, the government, all of that. And at some point, we get to decide what of that is really us and what do we want to take forward. And what are those pieces we can put down now because we've had a chance to explore them and have realized like, oh, that's not me. That's what my mom wanted me to do, or that's what this other person wanted me to do. And so I really think that the work that you're doing is beautiful in that way and helping people just navigate being human and getting more in touch with who they are authentically. You brought up breath work. And actually, I was like, I didn't have that on the things to talk about, but I would love to talk about that with you because I think it is so powerful. And I would love to have my listeners hear from you how you're using breath work in your practice and how that can benefit people.
I mean, breath work like meditation and yoga is a very broad term. And so I always like to teach that there's breath work tools, and then I feel like there's breath work healing. They have a different energy to them. So, like, breath work tools are so helpful for everyday situations. I do a 30-day breath work challenge, and it's through my virtual membership, and it's free. But we have like 3 different breathwork tools that we use, and they change and shift throughout the challenge. And then I also teach people how to track their progress with their breath. So we do things with like carbon dioxide and tracking your Bolt score and learning about your HRV, your heart rate variability, because a lot of times we think that we're breathing, but we're actually not breathing. And when we're not breathing, or we're not breathing to the full capacity that we have, we're not accessing our full life force. So just even taking a moment right now, like, I just invite your listeners to just pause and to just notice how you're breathing, right? Is it kind of shallow in just your chest? Is it really going all the way down into your belly? Because that's where we want breath to fully access, down into our belly and our diaphragm, through our lungs, and then all the way up through our chest. And a couple of really great breathing tools is one for if you are, most of the time when people reach out to me, it's because they're either stressed or they're anxious. Or they're overwhelmed or they're at work. There's even this thing that's called email apnea. And it's like, because we've become so conditioned to be stressed when we're working and when we're checking emails, that people stop breathing when they get an email or see something come through from somebody that triggers them, or they know is just going to be on their tail about something. So I would say that's a great place to start too, is either in the morning, just starting your morning with a breathing practice. And if you are somebody that gets distracted by your phone, then just do it before you even grab your phone, and just simply breathing in for 4 and then breathing out for 4. In the middle of the day, if you tend to be, again, like stressed or anxious or just not really taking time for yourself, I encourage clients to put a reminder in their phone so that it goes off and it reminds them to take, 3 really deep breaths, or set it for like a timer for 1 minute. And in the middle of the day, it's really great to do box breathing. Box breathing helps you be very focused and present while also still remaining in a very calm and parasympathetic nervous system state. So, breathing in for 4, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, and then holding for 4, and doing that maybe for 1 minute or even just 3 rounds of it. Like, keep it simple. And then at the end of the day, if you have trouble sleeping, that's something that people reach out to me a lot about, is doing 4-7-8 breathing before you go to sleep. So you breathe in for 4, you hold for 7, and then you exhale for 8. So depending on when somebody's listening to this, if they're listening to it at the end of their day, right, 4-7-8 would be great. And in the middle of the day or the beginning of the day, just a simple box breath or breathing in for 4 and out for 4. And then, breath work healing, I would say those tools are great. You can use the tools when you're at work, when you're having a difficult conversation with your partner or your kids are kind of getting to your last nerve. You can use it, if you're making dinner, you can do breathing tools. So, breathing tools can be accessed at any time. And then breath work healing, I have found so much power through it, clarity, releasing anxiety, releasing stress, releasing trauma, releasing, chronic things that keep happening in your body. It's very intuitive, it's very wise. And the reason why is because it puts you into a different state of consciousness when you do this particular healing breathing pattern. So it is best if you do it with somebody who knows what they're doing and who is trained in it, especially for your first. I usually try to tell people like 1 to like 5 times, because things can surface once you start to let go of all the masks and all of the layers that you tend to go through everyday life with. That will start to fade away as you do this breathing healing. And then, having somebody who can talk with you and guide you through it and also support you if there are things that surface when you do it. And so that's laying down, eyes are closed, the breathing is through the mouth, and you do this particular breathing pattern for a set amount of time with somebody holding space for you, and then having the ability to process, afterwards for 10, 15 minutes of what surfaced. And then that's why I like to make sure that you can also have integration. So it's like whatever came forward in that breathing healing session, then, you can learn from it and say, okay, this is what I'm going to start to practice each day, or this is what I'm going to focus on each day for the next week, until we maybe meet again. Breath work, I mean, I have just seen incredible, incredible things with breath work. I mean, I've seen people heal themselves of things that they did not think would be able to be healed. I've seen people, shift and change the course of their life, their relationships, their work, their creativity. It just is truly remarkable what happens through the power of breath, because it's your life force, right? It's also too inside of you. I know that's something that you and I were talking about before, and what we connected on is that I want to empower people to be their own healer, or to learn how to be a healer. It doesn't mean that we still don't need to sit in spaces with people, right? Like, I still have my own coach. I still access therapy at times when I need it. I still have people hold space for me. It's not that we can't have other people there. It's just when we tap into these layers, and the layers are really infinite and they're so beautiful. And I think too, what's powerful is that sometimes people, they think that this is just for particular type of person, maybe, but this is really, I've seen it be so helpful for, CEOs, for doctors, for executives, for stay-at-home mothers and fathers. It's just extremely powerful medicine. Your life force is right there inside of you, all the answers.
Absolutely. Well, and I love that you break that up or make the distinction between breathwork tools and then breathwork healing, because on this podcast and then with my clients, we talk a lot about the tools. So I've had Todd Steinberg, who was the founder of the company is called Camuso Designs, and they make a necklace that forces you into a 4-8 breathing pattern and using 4-8 breathing to help calm yourself before you go into a doctor's appointment or that kind of thing. And so I love that you gave those very concrete examples of breathwork tools that people can use, whether it's just box breathing or just even breathing of the 4 in, 4 out, and then also the 4-7-8 breathing as well, of having that. I think that it's important for people to try these different tools, because the other thing is sometimes one of these types of breathing is going to resonate more with you than another, and that's okay. Like, it's not that you can only do these at certain times, but it's like knowing that, one is going to help calm your nervous system before you go to bed, and the other one is more kind of activating and keeping us into kind of a stable response. So I love that. And then the idea of healing with breath work. And I think one of the things that people are asking me about a lot right now is psychedelics and using plant medicine. And what you're describing, what can be done with breath work, is very similar to what people are doing with plant medicine. And it's important for people to realize you can do this kind of deep work just using your breath, and that it is really important. Just like with plant medicine, the set and the setting, like who is holding that space for you and who is guiding you, is very, very important. It's also important in this space, and having that guide of someone who can be prepared if something comes up. How do you deal with that in a way that's not re-traumatizing? And how do you then integrate it? And I love you talked about that. It's like things come up, and that's not the only part of the healing. The healing comes in the integration and bringing this into your awareness on a conscious level, right? Because these are things that oftentimes we've got stored in our body at a subconscious level. And once you bring it up, then how do you integrate it into the awareness that you have? So I actually love all of that. And I love that you're doing that work in your practice with the breath work. Is there anything else in there that you want to share about breath work?
I mean, you said it so well that breath work is, I've had many people sit and do breath work with me, and they have said, gosh, I've done psilocybin, I've done ayahuasca, I've done San Pedro, whatever. And this was actually way more insightful and powerful and healing. And I think one of the reasons I really support people in whatever they think is aligned for them. So if that's plant medicine route or once a year plant medicine route and in between, breath work. I mean, I really support people in what they feel is right for them because like you said, some tools are so aligned and some tools might not feel aligned for you. And some tools might feel aligned at one point in your journey and then they might feel as aligned at another point in your journey. So, but I do feel like sometimes plant medicine might be overused. I think in the Western society, we have a tendency to overconsume and to not know when enough is enough. And so, one of the things that I do love about breath, even though I also, have experienced, plant medicine, most of my profound healing experiences have actually been through breath work.
Mhm.
And what I love about it is that you are conscious, even if you enter into another altered state of consciousness through breath work. You're also totally present in your body. So you mentioned trauma, and that is super important. So that's a really big part of what I do in my sessions. And then what I do when I'm training other people how to become breathwork facilitators. I do that training usually 2 or 3 times a year. It's virtual. Is that you really, number one, as a facilitator, need to be grounded inside of yourself and really clear on who's sitting in front of you and where you are and where they are. But also, too, if you're doing your own breathing, that's really important because the body, once it knows that it's safe, once it knows that it's being held, there's the ability for it to relax and for what needs to come forward without it being re-traumatizing. So I do feel that, breath work is a really effective tool because it's also you. It's not you ingesting something that's not you. And it's also, I'm trained in Reiki and I use Reiki sometimes with clients, but I love breath work because it is you. It's not me channeling Reiki energy. It's not me doing, shamanic energy like with you or for you. It is you. And you are meeting yourself. You are meeting your body. You are meeting your emotions. You are meeting your mind. You're meeting your relationship with something greater than you, whatever that is. And that is profound for people to realize, like, wow, I stayed with myself, even if it felt a little bit unknown or uncomfortable, or I wasn't sure if I would be able to keep going. And I find that that is what actually starts the healing process that then starts to ripple as they move into their life, as they realize, like, wow, I actually do have these resources inside of me.
Mhm.
I have this creativity inside of me. I have this ability to feel my emotions and stay fully present with myself when maybe in their life they had to overwork or they had to become sick or they had to leave themselves in order to cope and to stay safe with emotions. So it is just healing on so many levels.
And also, I think building trust in themselves, in like that resourcefulness, like realizing they have the resources in themselves. And a lot of what I see the work that I'm doing is teaching people how to trust themselves again. And what you're describing there with the breath work, even if you're facilitating, you're starting to teach them that they can trust what's inside, that it's safe to let that out, to experience themselves in whatever form, all of the messy, like we're messy, we're human beings, right? And we're emotional beings. And so that permission to be with what is exactly what's inside and teaching people how to trust that and how to be with themselves in a more full way than we've been conditioned to do. Most of us are taught that this is acceptable and this is not. And so then we start, pushing down these different parts or not expressing them. And this is an opportunity for people to reintegrate and bring all the parts back to themselves.
Yeah, and if people are interested that are listening, I do have a membership and it's $44 a month. And so there's one virtual breath work in there and it's so cool. We have people from all over the world. So just getting to have people like in Germany and in California and New York and Hawaii that are all breathing together. And I always put it in this framework that, like, just lighting up all these spots on the globe and how we're all bringing that collective energy together. And you mentioned something really important too about trusting yourself, and that is a very big part, I find, of the breath work too. And what I noticed with the breath work was that combined with some of the tools that I learned in my masters and a couple different coaching, is that what I started to do was something that I call somatic medicine. I mean, I love the laying down breath work and I still do that. And I think it's very effective. But what I also noticed is that sometimes people don't have the ability to lay down in the middle of their day when they're having a successful day as a CEO, right? Or as a doctor, or as a lawyer, or an architect. And so what I started to do was cultivate, somatic medicine process that people can tap into these very deep parts of them in a very safe and effective, and interestingly, it's quite quick too. Like, I think that was something that started to come forward for me, is that I wanted to demystify that healing has to be hard, healing has to be painful, healing has to have suffering in it, because I think that's what I noticed when I first started learning breath work and facilitating is, a lot of people were having big experiences, right? I'm sure, as you know, like sometimes you can feel a little buzzy or a little lightheaded. Sometimes you can feel like tightness in different parts of your body. There is a very physiological and scientific reason why that's happening, but it doesn't happen for everybody. So there's also some like emotional component to that. There's some spiritual component to that as to why people have very, a myriad of experiences. And so what I realized was that like we can kind of access these things sitting right here. So that's a lot of times what I'm doing now with clients is having them sit right here and they come onto the call and they share what's going on in their life, right? I had a terrible fight with my partner. I don't feel like I'm being listened to by my other C level, and I'm a woman sitting in this meeting with all these men and it doesn't feel safe or receptive. Or I have another client who took over a business from his father and he doesn't feel like he's living up to what his father is doing. So he's struggling with, the work. So whatever people come with, right? And we just kind of start by slowing down and tuning into the body and really noticing. Because what happens, I think, is sometimes, especially if we've gotten caught in like a loop, right? We would call it maybe a sympathetic loop, or in the limbic part of the brain, the midbrain is where we experience that fight or flight. And so sometimes when we get caught in these loops, it can be really tough to get ourselves, and especially to get ourselves out of it by ourselves. What I noticed was I just started feeling for people because they were doing their journaling, they were doing their prayer and meditation. Some of them were even breathing. They were writing down their gratitude lists. They were really trying. They were listening to podcasts, but they just still felt like I feel like I'm banging my head against a wall, like nothing's shifting and I'm kind of caught in this loop. And I think what's hard is that when highly effective people are caught in these loops, then I think it brings up a lot of shame,
Mhm.
of like, I can't tell anybody because I need to have it together and I need to be positive. And how am I going to get through this? I feel like I'm alone. And then that just kind of creates this loop. And so, starting by tracking the body, because we can get so caught in the mind and really we become disconnected from our bodies, right?
Mhm.
You know that too. And so, just really tuning into, okay, when you think about the experience with the other people in your C-level suite, or when you think about that challenging boss that you have at work, or the fight that you had with your partner, like where do you feel that in your body? Like, oh, I feel it in my, right above my belly button. Okay, great. And like, what's the sensation? Because when we start to detach from the label of like, I'm anxious, I'm stressed, I'm angry, that just feeds that energy even more. Right. And so then when we start to go into the sensations, and then we ask the sensations, like, what do they look like? What color are they? And we can almost kind of pull these things out. And it was partly similar to Gestalt therapy, which I learned in my master's, which was started by Fritz Perls in like the 1960s. And he really believed, Gestalt was this word that meant unfinished. And so a lot of times when we have these challenges in our life or we have these physical experiences, it's these unfinished things that are looking for us to bring them to wholeness, bring them to completion. And then we blend in the breath, like with the somatic experience, just while they're sitting up straight. And, a lot of clients are like, wow, like I just feel like I healed, in 30 minutes what I've tried to do in years of therapy. And it's when we can learn, like you said, to trust our body and trust that our body is not harming us, or it's not against us, or our emotions aren't harming us or against us, but they're actually, a lot of times when we pull these energies out and we just sit them in front of us and we have a conversation with them. Of course, like I'm guiding, and I'm teaching my clients how to be able to do this eventually for themselves, but they realize like, wow, that crippling negative voice, or that crippling anxiety, or that just like constant overwhelm or shame, like I'm feeling being a highly effective person, not feeling effective and hiding it. I didn't realize that that was just actually my friend. And it was trying to have me sit down and have a conversation with it. And then we can clear it out. Then we can let it go and like give the energy a new job and start to shift the energy in the body through your breath, through the power of what's inside of you.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you just said that, give the energy a new job, because I talk about that with people with their brain, of that our brains are constantly scanning. They're designed to keep us safe, right? So they're doing a job of scanning your environment for something to be afraid of. And if you have cancer, there's obvious things that you could be afraid of. And so then it almost justifies that. But it's like I talk about with your brain, it's like loving your brain for doing its job, which is to point out the things that are dangerous, but then you want to give it a job and you want to choose where you're putting your focus. But it requires actually not bypassing all of this stuff that's underneath. And I think one of the things that you're describing in here that is really, really important as part of the healing process is being seen and accepted for whatever is coming up and not figuring it out and having to be perfect. Like sometimes we don't tell our family or friends or something what's going on because we feel like, okay, I need to figure this out inside me. I'm not clear. And so I'm going to sit with it until I think I understand what it means. And then I'm going to share it. But there's something really beautiful and healing that happens when someone can find someone like yourself who does have the skills to help them work through this through breath work and to be witnessed in the messiness of it and just that it's all unconditional, like that we're all humans and we all have this piece. Because shame, I really believe with cancer plays a big part of it. And a lot of what I see is for people is that they want to do the right things. And like, just like you said, they're doing all the things. They're doing the affirmations, they're doing the diet, they're doing all these pieces. And then if they're not getting it perfect, then they're super hard on themselves. And I think that allowing it to be okay that there's this number one, we're not perfect. And I think people get that piece of it. But the other piece is of being really witnessed as being a vulnerable human being to say, I'm struggling, I'm challenged with this, and being loved through that process. I realize a lot of us don't have great models for being unconditionally loved for whatever we're going through. And there's something really beautiful about being witnessed and sharing in a safe space with someone like that to work through it and recognize, like, oh, I can love myself too through a process, just like Gwen loved me through this process, and starting to build that relationship with themselves so that eventually, and my goal is always with my clients, like, I don't want you to need me forever. Like, I love being with you and I love serving, but my goal is not to make them depend on me. My goal is to give them the inner resourcefulness, the tools that they need so that then they know how they can manage things on their own. And then I've just helped them, load their toolbox with some extra tools that will help them be a more resourceful human in whatever they face.
Exactly. Yes. And it is, I mean, I've gone through different like serious health issues. And I think one of the things, like going through like trauma informed training and like through somatic training, and I've recently done limbic retraining. So that's like really process of like how to take ourselves out of that loop. And like you said, I've also added kind of a component to it through the somatic medicine process, which is like it incorporates all these things because we're not just a brain, we're not just a body, we're not just somatics, we're not just physiological, right? Human beings, we're all of these components together. And so, what I noticed when I was going through health issues was that I was like going to here for limbic retraining. I was going here for somatic healing. I was going here for breath work. I was going here for human design, and I just felt like, oh my gosh, I want to create something so it's all in one spot and we don't have to be jumbled all over the place. And so it's like going into some of these deeper, younger parts of ourselves, as well as learning how to like stop the loop, thank it for trying to protect us, right? But it can relax. And then really seeing our choices like, okay, this is the choice of like the path that keeps going down the anxiety and the overthinking and the worry and the concern, which when you have health concerns, when you're experiencing something like cancer, it's very real. It's very valid.
Yeah.
Not to say that that's like just spiritually bypassing it, like, oh, thanks for trying to protect me. You can relax. That was one thing that bothered me about some of the limbic retrainings is like, no, there's something else. There's another component here. So we need to take a step back and really sit with this part that is really worried, but
Mhm.
need to say, when did it first come in? Like, how early did it come in our lives? And how has it maybe been hiding out and showing up in little places in our life? And then it becomes a really big front and center when we have, these diagnoses. Like I always tell people, it's like divorce, debt, death. Like these are the really big D's that like put us on our path of what you said in the beginning of making a choice. I think, maybe I'm not who I thought I have been or who my family conditioned me to be. And maybe this is really who I am. And that can feel scary too, to be in that liminal space of discovering who you really are and not having all of the things that were coping mechanisms that maybe weren't healthy, but were very attached to who you are. So I think something as part of the healing journey that a lot of people forget and don't necessarily talk about is that liminal space from when we separate from the old way. And then we're in this very uncomfortable liminal space of where we don't know who we are. We don't know what's really true or not true. We're discovering it before we have like the rebirth of who we are. And it's super important, right? To like hold ourselves and say, okay, yes, this is the path that I want to move to. This is the way that this old thing can now serve me in a new job, right? And then moving forward and like really visualizing that part of ourselves, but not bypassing, right? Like just passing any of these things because they're each so important to, the healing journey.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And, I think that Gwen, what's beautiful, what you just described is that your art, so like the art that you're practicing in your healing is bringing all those pieces together in what you were like, oh, I wish that there was this one place. So it's so beautiful that your art, the way that you're healing, the way that you're practicing is this new combination of things that really speaks to your soul and also brings out your gifts in the most powerful way. And that's what I wish for all my clients. And that liminal space that you talked about is like, I did that. And actually a lot of it was, seen on this podcast. I shared my story of leaving Western medicine. And I tell people like, I didn't know where I was going. The only thing that I could see was what wasn't working and what I needed to start to let go. And that requires having space held for that, whether you're holding it for yourself or you're working with other people. It's like, that's a scary kind of space to be in. And there's all the insecurities and uncertainties are things that come up during that process. So everything that you just said there, I resonate with. I want to, because we're coming up at the end of the hour, I wanted to have you share, how can people find you? If people want to know more about the work that you're doing, tell us how they can find you.
They can go to my website. It's gwendittmar.com, and my Instagram. That's a great way too. It's the same thing, just Gwen Dittmar, my name. And I was just going to share too, like co-regulation is super important when we're moving through that liminal space, right? Having that person that like, if our nervous system is feeling ungrounded, scared, unknown, right? Just having another person, I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned through, another modality, the and sound, protocol through Dr. Stephen Porges, who is like the father of the polyvagal theory, is that having that co-regulation is a huge part of being able to find comfort in that unknown and trust, right? And sometimes we have to live from other people's trust before we can really find our own and have our own data, of like, okay, I moved through this experience now, and this is what I've gathered, and this is what I can trust now to come through for me. So yeah, I would love to connect through my website, ideally sign up for my newsletter and maybe even just come and join, the membership, experience breathwork once or twice over a couple of months and see what it starts to do in your life. Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Gwen, for being with us today. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me on Born to Heal. It's been a privilege to share this time with you, and I hope that today's episode has offered you valuable insights on your journey toward optimal health. Please consider subscribing, sharing this podcast with your friends, and leaving us a review. To learn more about how you can work with me, please visit katiedemming.com. You can find additional resources in the episode show notes linked below, and remember to join us next week as we continue to explore more holistic approaches to healing. Until then, this is Dr. Katie Demming reminding you that just like me, you were born to heal. What if healing cancer didn't have to be so overwhelming and confusing? What if you could access a higher level of consciousness to accelerate healing? And what if you had a clear roadmap to follow, a path to lead you out of the fear and uncertainty? Hi, I'm Dr. Katie Deming. As an oncologist who's cared for thousands of patients, let me guide you safely through the fog. My 6 Pillars of Healing Cancer workshop series is now available, and it's not too late to join. Choose from a range of powerful workshops, each designed to support your healing journey, covering nutrition, emotional well-being, hydration, physical practices, the mind-body connection, and spirituality. Select only the workshops that align with you, or for a limited time, buy the entire bundle and enjoy significant savings. Don't miss this proven holistic roadmap to clarity and deep inner calm to support your healing process. Check the link in this episode's description to learn more and sign up today. Remember, you've got this.